and welcome to the Power Within podcast. I'm your host, Laurie. Today, I'm really excited to share with you my interview with Jeffry. Jeffry really inspired me by a couple conversations that we had where he spoke of his dedication and his passion to his patients. He had spent 47 years in family practice in Pennsylvania, and then he retired, and he came out of retirement to take care of these patients that were going to be abandoned by the current people who took over his practice. And he really is someone who wants to be there and make sure that the quote unquote unwanted in society have someone that they can depend on, and he has been that person for them. So his passion for that really inspired me because it's very hard to find doctors who really have that much passion and care for their patients on that level. And I thought it was something really wonderful that Jeff's doing. So I wanted to share this conversation with you guys. I hope that you enjoy it. He's got some fun little anecdotes, and he talks about the farm system that he had done when he was coming out, and so when he was coming out of his practice or his internship and with people. So I thought that was really great that he had gotten that going and got so many people involved in medicine by doing all that hands-on stuff. So that was really wonderful for him to share. I hope that you guys really enjoy this and you get a lot from what Jeffry shares, and support each other and really take that leap to be good support systems for other people. So I hope that you guys enjoy this, and here we go. Hi Jeff, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I'm really excited to have you on.
It's my pleasure, Laurie.
Now, I wanted to have you on, and you're very inspiring. You have been 47 years in family practice, and your passion for your patients and your love of what you do really inspired me, and it really touched me. And I wanted to have you come on and share. So I want to ask you the first question. What inspired you to want to become a doctor, and what inspired you to keep going with that?
Well,
once you had
I think that what originally inspired me is that I saw my mother was an RN. She was a nurse, and my father was a podiatrist, and he had a house. He had the office in the house, and so I got to see him interact with the patients from a very, very young age. And then as I got older, I realized that I wanted to go into business for myself. And back then, it was easy. You just hung a shingle and you were in business. So I think that those were the major factors. I wanted to be my own boss, and I had the two role models, my mother and my father, that kind of spurred me on. And for family practice, I just fell in love with it. I covered about 20 guys on the weekends after I finished my internship. And I just saw the value in being able to see everybody in the family and connect with them and feel a part of their family, and they felt a part of my family.
That's awesome. And can you share a little bit about your schooling experience to get there?
Yeah, I went to, I finished high school, and I did very well in high school. And then I went to Lehigh University. Unfortunately, being an 18-year-old, I kind of made an 18-year-old decision. I chose the school by the golf course that the team played on. So I landed up playing on Saucon Valley's Grace course, which is, one of the top courses in the country. But I don't think I was a match for the school that I was at, but I made it work. I worked very, very hard, especially my last 2 years, to make up for the first 2 years when I didn't do that well. And I finally realized after 2 years being a math major that I really wanted to go into the medical field one way or the other. And so I did. I went through the process, which is a difficult one to apply to medical school, especially back then, because people were taking bribes to get kids into medical school, which my father totally bristled at. And then when I finally got an opportunity to be interviewed through a family friend, that's when I was accepted to Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine. The gentleman that introduced me to the registrar who interviewed me 2 weeks after I was accepted was killed in a robbery. And this very, very, it upset me and my father and everybody. And so I kind of had an extra incentive because I really wanted to make Lou Cooper proud, who was the guy that introduced me to the registrar. So I told the registrar after this all happened that he didn't make a mistake and I would show him that it was probably the best thing he ever did. And sure enough, 4 years later, I finished first in the class. So and he leaned down to me. He was like 6'5", and I'm like 5'5". And he leaned down to me and he said, "Your father and Lou Cooper would be really proud of you right now." When he gave me my valedictorian plaque and diploma and the whole bit. So that to me was a very, very touching moment. And it gave me a tremendous incentive to get started in my career.
And I was so impressed when we were talking, and you had said, you did 47 years, and then you had sold your practice, stayed with them, and then left, and you ended up coming back. Now, I know that you're a huge advocate for substance abuse and helping those people. So can you explain a little bit to people why you ended up coming back into the position?
Well, I was working for the people that bought my practice for about 6 months. And I realized after 3 months that I was a total misfit. I didn't believe the way they were, running things. I didn't. It was just very impersonal. That they got rid of 4 of my oldest employees. It was just a very, very uncomfortable environment for me. And I did have a significant number of people on pain medicine, and I had a significant number of people that were being treated for substance abuse. And as soon as I decided to leave December 31st of 2015, um, they were starting to they brought a guy in who was in pain management, and he started to throw out patients left and right onto the street. And he says, "I'm not going to treat you. I'm not going to treat you." And I got word of it. A couple of patients actually called me. They were crying, and I said, I can't deal with this." So I had my attorney contact the hospital's attorney, and not that I threatened them, but I basically said that if you're going to abandon these people, I want you to lift my restrictive covenant for just the people that you want to get rid of. And I said, I'll be more than happy to continue to see them. So I opened up around the corner about 100 yards away in a friend's office. In the back of his office, he gave me a room. And I started to get people that just had nowhere to go. They were going to go out on the street and do heroin or steal something or whatever. And I couldn't have it because most of these people are the nicest people you want to meet. Uh, they have had unfortunate accidents. They're in chronic pain. Or they have had a substance abuse issue, and I just wanted to make sure that I was there for them.
Yeah, and I know you had told me that in all the years you've done practice, you've only had one person who had OD'd and didn't make it.
Right.
And I think that that speaks a lot to the care that you give. And my question on this is, why do you think now that the doctors are so detached from the patients? Like you go in and you take you'll sit in an office and it's 45 minutes waiting for someone to come in, then they come in, it's not personal at all, and then you're gone. It's more like you're a number. What do you think can be done about that, and why are these doctors so detached now that they don't care like we do?
Well, I'm not so sure that they don't care. It's just that the system that they're working under causes them to see a certain number of people a day. There's a demand from above that they have to practice medicine according to the way the management wants them to practice medicine. And there's no self determination anymore. When I went into practice, I hung a shingle and I was the boss. Whatever I said went. And I just, I dealt with that. I mean, I went on house calls because I wanted to go on house calls. I knew half of my patients' telephone numbers by memory. I knew who was related to whom. None of that's like that anymore. You go into a doctor's office now, they got their head buried in a computer. They don't even make eye contact with the patient half the time. My practice is completely different. I have 55 patients. I'm on 24/7 call. In fact, just before I got on the phone with you, I was filling prescription refills out for several patients that I saw a week and a half ago, but I won't see for another 2.5, 3 weeks. So they've got me, and especially in addiction and pain management, having a doctor 24/7 at a fingertip by a text message is worth its weight in gold because they won't make a stupid decision. They won't make something that's going to be detrimental to them because they've got me a fingertip away. And I think that if the physicians still had that personal touch, I think a lot of patients the whole situation would be different.
Yeah, definitely. And I know when you and I talked, you had said, you really want to make these people feel like they matter. And, you will send them, a birthday text or a birthday card or something to let them know that somebody is thinking about them. And I thought that that was really great because a lot of people who are dealing with these addictions and the substance abuse, they don't have a lot of people because people will abandon them. And I think that there's a big stigma about, people who have these problems and they kind of get pushed away like they're, you know, nothing and trash. And that's not the case. And I know that you had said that there is a difference between addiction and dependence. And I would love for you to explain what that difference is to people who don't understand that.
People that have a chronic opioid uh, treatment program are dependent on that opioid, on the medicine. Um, it basically means that if you stop it suddenly, they're going to go into some type of a withdrawal syndrome. Okay. Now, that can happen with regular medicine. It doesn't necessarily have to be an opioid. If I were to withdraw your hypertension medicine suddenly, your blood pressure would shoot up to a very, very high area that would put you in medical danger. Well, that's the same thing that happens with an opioid, except it's an opioid. So I think that that's where dependence and addiction draws the line. Addiction is where a person is dependent, but they have much less access to the system. And so they choose to steal it out of somebody's medicine cabinet. They break into the pharmacy down the street. They take money that they get from one medication and trade it for a different medication. In other words, diversion. So addiction and diversion are hand in hand. Dependence is just a state where people are dependent on the medication that they're taking, but it's not necessarily an opioid or a stimulant or a benzo, which is a downer.
Mhm. And when you like let's say let's talk for the opioid, like when you have to prescribe that, you had explained to me and we were talking about this that it's not like for people to get high, it's they're still going to feel pain, and I know that you experienced that as well, recently. And so I think a common misconception is that people think, oh, everyone's just trying to get high. but that's really not it. It's just to try and manage some of that pain,
Yes,
correct?
it's to control it, not to eliminate it. it Pain is a defense mechanism in our body. When we have pain, our body's telling us that there's something wrong. If you cover that pain up and something happens, then you're putting yourself in medical jeopardy. So, yeah, on a scale of 1 to 10, I want my patients at a 4 or a 5 because I don't want them overdoing themselves. If they do more physical activity than they should and they're relatively pain free, they're going to hurt themselves. And so it's a fine line that you walk, but it's a line that you have to draw between the patient and the treating physician. And that's why we have them sign treating contracts where they're basically saying, we're going to follow everything you tell us to follow, and we're not going to divert or change any of the programs that you're suggesting. Otherwise, you're going to face dismissal, or discharge.
Hmm. And sometimes, you're a great doctor and you're very in touch with your patients and you're very active with them. Now, there's times where, like you said, the practice that you were with, they were just kind of throwing them out and going, whatever. And that's where sometimes addictions can come in. Now, for situations where there's not like a pain or an injury or something like that that's happened where this is a requirement, you see in the world right now there's so many, like the new thing is the rainbow fentanyl that's coming in, and everything seems to be laced, and people are going out trying to find all these different antidotes to to cover up, or sometimes it's just to get high. How do you think for those situations that, like, how do you think that people can try to eliminate those in as a doctor seeing that? Does it start from home? Does it start from how people learn about opioids and how they can, and drugs, and how those can
Well,
affect you?
I think that the first thing you should do is to never buy anything on the street. Never accept a pain
Yep.
medication from your next door neighbor. You These are why prescribed medications are so vital, because at least there's a safety net there, that there's an FDA and a DEA that is monitoring the manufacture and the distribution of these medications. It just flabbergasts me when I see people throwing pills into a bowl and then putting their hands in, pulling them out, and swallowing a handful. That's called fishing with a pH. That to me is absolutely insane. And it trickles all the way down to the teenagers. And, frankly, I think that I can understand why it happens, because people are not paying attention anymore to their kids. When they do pay attention to their kids are getting very, very good at hiding things and not being honest with their parents. And until something horrible happens and a disaster strikes, that's all of a sudden when people become aware. And I can't tell you, I've seen families decimated by drug overdose in the same family. And it's horrible. It's just horrible how it's ripping apart our society, and among other things, this is just one of the worst scourges. But I believe that it's number one, it's the lack of access to physicians. Number two, it's the lack of physicians that are trained to handle these things. For the 10 million people that are legitimately in need of pain medication in this country, there's only about, I think it's less than 1,000 pain management specialists in the whole country for these 10 million patients. It's ridiculous. It's a terribly small number. Um, People need to be able to go somewhere where they are treated fairly, they're treated objectively, they're not treated like they're criminals, they're not treated like they're low lifes, and their problems are addressed uh, professionally. And as soon as they start going out and getting non-professional treatment, that's when that's when the problems start arising. One other thing that you mentioned, do you realize that most people that go for drug testing, they don't even test for fentanyl? It's not even in the drug panel. You have to order it separately.
Oh, wow.
Okay? Oxycodone is not in the general drug panel. You have to order that specifically. Now, what's that going to do? I mean, you go to an ER and they do a drug screen on you. You could have fentanyl, you could have oxycodone in there, and it won't even show up. So, how's that medical treatment going to work?
And why do you think? Because fentanyl is, I think what we see in the United States is probably one of the most dangerous drugs that's on that's in the states. Like, so why do you think that they wouldn't test for that?
I, you know, I'm not in privy to these kind of decisions, but I know in my office I specifically pay extra, and I check for alcohol, which is ETG. I check for oxycodone, and I check for fentanyl, because these people can slip right past me, and I won't even know it, and I won't be able to call them on it. And and if they leave my office and they sell whatever prescription I give them and trade it for something else, I have no control over that. I'm not aware of what they're doing. So a lot of times I'll pick these things up in drug testing, and luckily I have a very, very stable population. So I don't really get a lot of monkey business, but I used to. And we used to discharge our patients maybe 4 or 5 a week, just because we know that they were bad actors.
Yeah. And I know that, like, especially in the U.S., we had talked about before that it's actually hard to even get a prescription now. Like, most doctors don't even want to deal with that. So there is people who you can go in and you're suffering, like in pain, something may have happened, and they'll be like, okay, we don't want to even give you pain medicine. So why do you think that the doctors are so hesitant now to give pain medicine to
Simple.
people?
They threaten you with your license. Um, I know a half a dozen doctors or more just in my immediate area that have been SWAT teamed by either the DEA, the OIG, or the FDA, or somebody, alphabet soup. There are people that are practicing in fear because they don't want to lose their license. It's their livelihood. They got to take care of their families. And, if you have to trade off, taking care of your family or giving out legitimate pain medication, you're going to opt for your family every time. Unfortunately, there's people that are falling by the wayside because of it, and what happens is when a doctor makes that decision to treat people like this, and they start getting referrals from other doctors because they don't want to be involved. And frankly, most of my referrals come from pain management doctors that don't want to be involved with the everyday writing of the pain medication. They want to stick needles into people because they get 10 times the number of money that they get paid, and they don't want to be bothered with watching these people like a hawk, which is basically what I've been doing. So it's really the whole system is upside down. I can't tell you. There is so much fear out there in the medical community to minister to these people. Um, the reimbursement is inadequate for the amount of time that we spend. I spend an hour on every single patient, just going over their chart before I even see them every month. And now that really doesn't become very cost effective after a while. But luckily, in the situation I'm in, I have no staff. I have no overhead. I have a nominal rent. My biggest expenses are my malpractice insurance, my liability insurance, insurance. You know, that's my biggest expense. And other than that, I am able to foot some of that, expense because I I'm I don't have to charge the patients as much as the time that I'm actually putting in.
Hmm. And a lot of the patients, like with the the doctors and being pushed out, like you really are exceptional with making sure these people are taken care of and felt wanted and like they matter. And can you speak to that a little bit, why that's important to you, especially with family dynamics changing and what you've seen and how that has impacted people that you've worked with, because you do go that extra mile and make
Well,
people feel like
I
they matter.
believe that most people that have problems with medication, um, either psychologically, psychiatrically, whether it's due to an accident or a perceived accident, or the pain that they're in is actually physical or mental. Um, I believe that it all goes back to when they were in their teen years. And if you were to take a real good history on almost every person that has a problem with medication, there is something in their past where they were either abused mentally or physically. Uh, they were bullied. They were singled out because they were different. There was something there, and they had to treat themselves. And then all of a sudden, they get to be their teen years, and they start getting access through other peers or whatever. And they go to alcohol, then they go to marijuana, then they start, meeting up with friends who introduce them to the heavier stuff. But when they take this stuff, a lot of times it makes them feel what they say normal, whatever that is. And so initially they start out thinking that they're treating themselves, that they're actually making themselves feel better. And then the ugly tentacles come out from the medication, and they find that they're trapped. And now they're a victim, or they are a prisoner of the substances that they have been trying to use. So then they jump to other substances, and then there gets to be a whole vicious cycle of substance jumping in order to seek that normal feeling, whatever that happens to be. And so these people are just, they just want somebody to talk to, that will pay attention to them, that will spend the extra hour or 2 hours when they first come into your office, so that you get a feeling for exactly what's wrong with them. I spend 2 hours on every new patient, and I don't see too many new patients anymore because of the whole environment. But um, I spend a lot of time going through them, and do they have ADD and ADHD? Do they have poly disease, which is being treated correctly or maybe even incorrectly? I've had patients come into me that were misdiagnosed, that they were told that they had Lyme's disease, and they turned out to have, something else even more horrible, a rheumatic disease, for example. So, people need to have a correct diagnosis. Um, and if they're not getting a correct diagnosis, they're not going to get correct treatment. And so a lot of times they cover it up with other things, just because of the fact that there's no nobody's doing anything for them, and it becomes extremely frustrating. And then it trickles down to the whole family. The whole family dynamic changes, and eventually the parents get so fed up because their kids are stealing from them, and they can't trust them. Trust is a big issue. uh, you know, uh, they just get thrown out. And then they land up, who do they land up with? They land up with other people that are medical zombies. That's what I call them. And they're not going to get any kind of educational support from these people. So it just goes on and on and on. I just had a new patient that came in. I just happened to see one that was referred to me by somebody that I already knew. And he said that in 1 month I did more for him than he's had done for him in 20 years. And that's it, it makes me feel good. That's my therapy. Because I hear something like that, it just makes me want to do it again. All I did was I just screened him properly. I made proper diagnosis, and he says, "Well, why didn't they tell me this 20 years ago?" He's got a florid case of ADD and ADHD, and if he had been treated for that then, I'm telling you, he would not have gone to the stimulants that he went to, and then it just blossomed from there. So this is something that really needs to be addressed, and I don't know what the answer is. That's one thing I don't have. I have an answer within my own practice, but I don't have an answer for the country, for the state, for the city, the locality. I don't have an answer because this has gotten to be such an epidemic that, and I think that the government's part of the problem. I think that the government has set up situations where they're cutting off the supply to the pharmacies. The pharmacies are then turning around and saying to patients, "We can't give you your medicine anymore because we don't have the supply. We don't have the inventory to do it." So then these people go around and they're going to 10, 15, 20 other pharmacies looking for pain medications. They're not seeking, they're just trying to find a place to get it. But they're being labeled as such.
Yeah.
So that's the problem,
Yeah.
or that's one of the problems.
Yeah, yeah. And I remember like years ago, like, there was, and I think some of it too is the pharmaceutical companies, before they didn't care. And then when it became an issue, all of a sudden it was, oh, we're going to push back on the doctors and everyone's got a drug problem. And I think that they don't take, accountability either for their position in it. And I know something that another thing that you just mentioned is, you said you don't know the answer to it on a larger scale, but I know that you were part of, I believe it was, you had said a external program of like a farm system where you had worked with interns and 60% of them stayed local. Can you share about that? Because I thought that this was
Well,
really cool that you did.
when I was a sophomore in medical school, this was back in 1972, a friend of mine went out to a suburban location, a hospital, small hospital, and he started doing H&Ps, history and physicals. He was doing some general stuff on the floors to help out the staff and everything. And he came up with the idea of, hey, can you attract some other students to come up here to do some work? They'll pay them $10 an hour at the time, which was a fortune for us as a medical student. And so I started recruiting people to come up there. And this thing just went on and got legs. And we were certifying people to do certain procedures. And then we were trying to attract, some really, really good people. And so the first intern class was 3 doctors, then it was 5 doctors, then it went to 7 doctors. And it just became like a farm system for a baseball team. And what happened was, in the long run, and I landed up getting to be put in charge because the guy that invited me up decided to become a cardiologist, and he went off to Texas. And I went to the board of directors and I said, look, these guys are going to stay at this hospital and they're going to become your attendings of the future. You should invest in them and give them the opportunity. And we didn't actually have residents until 1977. So these guys were just thrown into the ring and doing deliveries, putting in catheters, doing, I mean, everything to open cardiac massage in the emergency room. They were doing surgeries with the attendings. I mean, this is experience that you don't even get nowadays because there's too many layers of people in front of you, and you're in the back of the room watching everything. This was all hands on at the time. And so 60% of the doctors that we trained stayed, and they became not only for that hospital, but for all of the other hospitals in my county, in Bucks County. So it really was pretty cool that a lot of the doctors that I actually trained were the doctors that were taking care of all these other patients. And my attending the first year said to me, he says, if you see a patient, it's one on one. He said, if you teach another doctor and they see patients, it goes up exponentially. Now, if that doctor treats and teaches three or four other doctors, then it goes up even more. The next thing you know, your one could turn out to 250,000 patients that are being taken care of. And that's basically what happened in our community. I would say that almost everybody that was in primary and in specialty at one time or another went through my office.
That's incredible. Now, do you think if there was more programs like that, like all around, do you think that that would be something that could improve
I
the
think
healthcare
that
system?
at this point it does exist. I mean, there are intern programs and where people train under other people, but I don't think it's as organized as we were. It also wasn't as hands on, and I don't know that it could become that hands on nowadays, because for every first of all, there isn't even internships anymore. People go right into specialty tracks, and there's very few people that are going into quote internships, the traditional internship. So I don't think that will ever happen, because of the fact that it's just a whole different system. And the reimbursement from Medicare and the feds and the insurance companies affects the bottom line of the hospital, and so on and so forth. So, and there's
Yeah.
liability issues also,
I
you
love,
know.
yeah. Yeah, I love that. I was like, I have to make sure I have him share that because I thought that that was so cool when you shared that. I was like, wow, if they could still, I mean, I know that there was residencies and like the different
Right.
things you were talking about now, but I was like, I love that you did that and I love that it made such an impact in your community because it is important to, be
Yeah.
active in our communities. And another thing that I wanted to talk about is that you actually have a Substack. And on your Substack, you've shared some great stuff. There was a ideal physician and an excellent patient writing that you did, and you basically run through like what makes an ideal physician and what makes an excellent patient. And you have some other great writings that include topics of trust and integrity, honesty, ethics, and friendship. Now, can you share a little bit about your passion for doing that writing and sharing your
Well,
work
I
on there
think
as
that
well?
most lay people don't have the opportunity to really sit back and reflect on how they can improve themselves and how they can improve their medical care. My last article that I published on Substack is called Patient Advocacy, and that's one of my real big topics. Um, you are your best advocate. Um, Nobody's going to take care of you better than you. And if you aren't going to take complete and total control over your health care, you can't expect anybody else to do the job. So, you have to be in control of your medications. You have to be in control of your diagnoses. You have to, you're the only one that can feel your pain. You're the only one that can feel whether you're getting better or not. You have to be the one to decide on whether this is working or not. I had a situation where I had an ulcer of my right ankle about a year, I guess it's 2 years now. And it was going on for 6 months and it wasn't getting any better. And I actually went through until I found my fifth opinion. I just kept going from an orthopedic doctor to a wound management doctor, so on and so forth, until I found a plastic surgeon. And he says, well, your legs are swollen, and we have to get rid of the swelling in your legs. And once he did that, all of a sudden, this ulcer that just didn't want to go away started to actually close up. Now, it took 11 months, but it could have spread into my bone, but I didn't allow it to, because I just was doing everything I possibly could to keep it. And it was so superficial. The bone is superficial. So it was inevitable that it was going to go into that. And yet I was able to prevent it. 2 months ago, I developed some nausea and abdominal pain. And I knew that I had an appendix within 12 hours. So I said, you know what? I better go to the hospital. And I started getting chills, and I knew I was getting septic and so on and so forth. I got to the ER and I told them, I said, I have an appendicitis. You got to do something about it right away. But I didn't take any pain medication because I wanted to know where my pain was and how to handle it. Now, okay, somebody's going to be sitting there and saying, well, you're a doctor. You should know, all these things. But I'm the lay person. I don't understand all these things. Well, in that case, you're right. But you've got to be your own advocate. You've got to ask questions. You've got to know the questions that you've got to ask, which is why I wrote these articles for the ideal doctor, for the exceptional patient, because you've got to go into your office visits to the emergency room prepared. Okay, if somebody says to you, well, what medications are you on? And if you say, I don't know, well, that's not going to help anybody. I always told patients, I mean, from the time I went into practice, I took a lot of courses in medical school, probably about 70 or 80 courses. The one course I didn't take was mind reading. Okay, you come into my office, I can't read your mind. You have to tell me what's wrong with you. And when patients come in and they don't know their allergy list, they don't have an idea of what their medicines are, their past medical history, their past surgeries. eh, you're putting the entire medical community at a disadvantage, because they're going to spend a lot of time trying to find out what's wrong with you when they could be treating you instead. And so that's why I'm trying to put some of these articles out, because it's actually making people aware of things that nobody talks about. And I think that this is, you've got to be educated as a patient. And once you're educated, that makes you a better patient. And it also makes your doctor better, because then they can worry about your treatment rather than trying to figure out what's going on.
Yep. And I love it too. Like, if I found it really beneficial too, even reading it from a perspective of, I remember I went in with my grandmother she had to go to the ER. And, sometimes when they're really busy, they're just like, okay, we're going to go do this test because, this might be the problem. And I remember they were like, it was either a CT scan or an MRI. They're like, we're going to take her down. I'm like, no, you're not. She has a pacemaker and she can't go in for that. And they were like, oh. And, she didn't know, at that point, there was something really wrong. And she was like she couldn't even remember her own stuff. So I think as a caretaker, I found your list to be really beneficial. And I was like, this is
Right.
really helpful information that other people can take even for themselves, or if they are a caretaker. So I
Yeah,
think it's great
and
that you
I'm going to
shared that.
continue to do things that address, and I don't write that often because I want to make sure that whatever I put out there actually is something that's makes sense and that is actually useful. You can just write anything you want, but that's not really the point of it. And I just think that these things need to be discussed, though, because a lot of times I'm a patient first now, because I'm not as busy as I used to be, and so I got to take care of me. I'm 74. I've got every disease in the book. I tried them all out before I treated my patients, and now I go into my doctors, and most of my doctors used to be my former students, and now they're all retiring. And I'm saying, no, 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 you can't do that. Um, uh, Guess what? I'm on my own now because all these people that knew me don't know, they're gone. So I have to introduce myself now. So
Yeah.
the average new patient visit where I go to a new doctor, I am equipped with about 30 to 40 pages of medical information that I hand to the doctor themselves. I actually fax it first so that the office can sort it and get it all into the chart nice and everything. But then I bring it with me to the appointment and I say, hey, you should know this, you should know that. This is important, this isn't important. And I'm a patient now. I'm not the doctor, I'm the patient. Treat me like a patient. Don't treat me like I'm the doctor. And that's everybody should be like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love that you had shared with me how, you'll spend time, which I think factors into like what you just said about writing, and you only share things that you feel are really important or can benefit others. Because I know you shared that you take time also to go when you have your patients and you're thinking of them, you read articles and you'll find things that you think may be beneficial to other people and then share with them. So I
If I
love that
get
you do
something,
that
let's
because
say
that's so
on the
helpful.
internet from Medscape, let's say, or from the Merck manual, or something that would be beneficial to them, I will copy and paste onto my list of patients, and I have them all listed. So I have all their phone numbers, and I send out a blanket text message, and just to educate them and let them know that there's a new brand of fentanyl out there, for example, or where do you get free Narcan or naloxone? The pharmacies are giving it out this week. Just to put them on notice so that they're able to avail themselves. Which COVID shot to take, the flu shots that are out now, which are the most important ones to get. So I'll just let them know, and it may not be even germane to their disease state, but it's something that I feel that they should know and to inform them so that they can become a more informed patient.
That's amazing. And I think with that speaks a lot to integrity, and I know that that's something that's really important to you too. And I was wondering if you would just share a little bit. I know that's in your writings, it's in your work, it's ingrained within you, like
Well,
how important integrity
integrity is
is.
interspersed with trust, and if somebody comes to you and they have a good feeling about how ethical you are and how much integrity you have, then it's likely that they're going to trust you. They're going to trust what you do, they're going to trust what you say, and it allows for you to have a much healthier relationship with somebody else. Whether they're somebody that you've known for 60 or 70 years or somebody that you've just met, um, your reputation is something that you can't buy. It is something that you have to earn, and it's an accumulation of your entire life. And it only takes one bad thing that you did to taint that ethical integrity, reputation. Um, it's just not worth it, because you can spend an entire lifetime trying to undo that what you did. So I found out at a very young age, probably in my teens. I know that my mother probably did. The first time she ever held me accountable, um, she used to smoke 4 packs of cigarettes a day, and I think I was 11. And she lit up a cigarette and handed it to me, and she says, "I want you to smoke this." And I'm looking at her and I'm saying, "Are you kidding me?" So I did. And I got so sick that was the last time I touched a cigarette. And she was pretty smart. I mean, she figured it all out. She figured, you know what? Let me give him a bad experience right off the bat, and maybe he won't do it again. Well, it's the same thing with, dealing with kids. You give them a controlled bad experience or a bad situation, they're less likely to do it. And these kids now, they're being exposed to, the alcohol that you have hidden in your house that they know exactly where it is. I had two sons that had guns, and I didn't even know they had guns when they were teenagers. I mean, it horrified me, but we grew up on a farm, and I would find bullet holes in the barn, and I didn't know where they came from. Well, here, when we weren't home, my my kids were doing target practice against the barn wall. Um, it's just, you just can't let down your guard. And you try to teach people lessons. You try to stress the importance of honesty, integrity, and then you just have to live with the decisions that you make. And so I've been trying to do that now that I have more time on my hands. But to be able to support people to do the right thing, or to do something, to challenge themselves to do the right thing, it pays dividends, and a lot of dividends in the long run, because it really allows them to improve their lives, and then they can turn around and improve other people's lives. And it's just like the story with the interns and the externs. You teach one, you get one. You teach more than one, you're going to get exponential number of people that are going to benefit.
Yeah, and I think that that's so needed in the world that we live in, especially today, because the world that you grew up in, the world that I grew up in, it's definitely
Right.
changed. It is nothing like it used to be with all the technology and advancements. So it's crazy. Um, Something that I love that I want you to share is an anecdote that from when you were your first delivery. I think that people would love to hear this, and it's going to make
Sure.
them laugh. So would you
I
mind
was a
sharing this?
senior, I believe it was, in still in medical school, and I was playing pretty high level golf at the time, and so I had gotten up to about 185 pounds, and it was very uncomfortable because at the time I think I was actually 5'7". I'm still shrinking, and I decided to lose a lot of weight. So I worked out, and I mean, I was working out 6 hours a day, and I really took it seriously. And I got down to about 145 pounds, and I had never been 145 pounds except maybe when I was born. And so I get called. I'm on duty. I'm the only doctor in the hospital. I wasn't. I was a medical student, mind you. The OB guys were not there. It was like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and I get a phone call, or a page. Dr. Lindenbaum stat to the OB suite, and I'm looking around and saying they mentioned me. So I go running down, because that's our training, and I come blasting into the OB suite, and there's Jessie, who's a nurse that was a nurse for about 40 years. And I could tell she had her badges on because she had a string of safety pins pinned from up here all the way down, dangling down past her waist, which I couldn't figure out what they were for at the time, but I found out later. So I said, "What do I do?" She said, "Well, the woman is crowning. The baby's going to be out any minute now. You've got to go get ready." I said, "Well, how do I get ready?" So she says, "Oh, you haven't done this before, have you?" I said, "No." She said, "Well, you just follow my lead and I'll tell you what to do, but you've got to do it because you're the doctor." Okay. So she said the first thing you do is you run into the locker room, and you got to put on your greens. So I went into the locker room, and there were 3 sets of greens in there. That was it. And there were 2 3Xs and 1 2X. So here I am, skinny as can be now, and I did my best to try to, put the greens on and everything. And I come running out, and I said, "Okay, what's next?" And she says, "Well, you got to scrub." So I said, "How do you scrub?" So she shows me how I'm supposed to scrub and get sterile and everything. And obviously, I was taking up entirely too much time for her because she kept running back in to make sure the baby wasn't out already. And so I come running into the room, and my arms are up in the air like this, and my pants fell down. And not too embarrassing. So Jesse didn't bat an eye. Here comes the safety pins. And she pins up the one side, and she pins up the other side, and she pins up my back. And she says, "Okay, Doc, it's time. We got to go in and take care of delivering the baby." Well, in the meantime, the mother's looking to the side past her legs, seeing the doctor with his pants down. Oh my goodness. So, what can I tell you? So I went through the delivery. Jessie, God bless her. She's no longer with us, but I delivered. So, okay, I was pretty happy. It's my first delivery. So about 10 years later, my wife calls me up, and she says, "On your way home from the office, would you stop at Pathmark and pick up some milk and eggs and whatever?" So here I am. I'm in, and I never go to the supermarket. So this one night I was at the supermarket, and I'm checking out, and all of a sudden, this woman, I hear this shrill shriek in the next aisle, and she says, "Johnny, that's the doctor that delivered you 10 years ago, whose pants fell down." And here I am, and there must have been about 15 people around me, and I'm turning as red as a beet. And I guess Johnny thought it was a pretty cool story. I guess he thought his mother made it up or something because it sort of sounded made up. But that was my one little experience in the EOB suite. That oh my God, talk about excitement that night. So
Is that your most? I cracked up laughing so hard when you were telling me that. Is that now? Do you think that that ranks as like your all time most memorable
I would
experience in
say
all
that that's up
your
there.
time?
I'm sure that if I thought about a few other instances, I could probably come up with some other things. But that was the one that probably embarrassed me the most, if nothing else.
Hmm. Yeah, it was so funny. I loved it. And to wrap up, I would like to ask you about there was something that you had written, that you can find all the answers in nature. And I'm big on being outdoors in nature, and I was wondering if you would share some of your wisdom with that piece of
Well,
writing that you
I
came up
think
with
that
and why
everything,
you feel that
life is a
way.
pattern. There are patterns all around us. Um, just look at clouds, they form different patterns. Rainbows form different patterns. Trees form different patterns. Everything seems to have a reason or a purpose for one thing or another. A lot of our organs look like things that grow in nature. It's just that we're all intertwined, and many times when there's one thing, it's really represents other things that it could be. And so I find it amazing sometimes when you reflect back of some of the things that you're exposed to, and things happen for a purpose. And sometimes you don't necessarily see it right in front of you, but when you retrospectively look at these things, then all of a sudden it becomes kind of obvious. Hey, I forgot that happened to me 5 years ago, or it happened last week, or maybe that was a harbinger of what was to come, or whatever. And things happen for a reason. I can't begin to tell everybody that things are done for, well, this crazy reason why I got into medical school, and how the guy got shot and was killed in the robbery, and how, and I didn't mention that the year that I was studying the hardest, when I had 23 exams in 10 days, my father was dying in the VA hospital, and I was studying outside of ICU. And I I went in and I aced every exam. I was so far ahead, like 5 points higher than anybody else in my class, that's why I became first in the class. It was just from that one semester alone. So, and my father would say to me, "When are your finals over? When are your finals over?" And I said, "Well, the 19th of December," and he died on the 20th. So, I learned a long time ago that things happen for a reason, and you just have to to get a grasp on why they're happening, and what you can do to either change the way things are happening, or to deal with them, or to make sure that whatever it is that you do is compatible with nature, and compatible with your ethics and integrity, and all the things that you live by.
I love that. That is incredible. And I think that that is the perfect note to end this on, because I don't think that there's one question I could ask that would have gotten a better answer than that. So I want to say thank you so much for coming on, Jeff. And I know that you have a lot of great resources. So I am going to put in the show notes where people can find you. Where are you most
I
active
guess
for people who do want to follow you, though?
Telegram, Instagram, Substack, and Facebook, I guess, would be, you know, I'm around somewhere.
Okay. Okay, perfect. And I'll put that all in the show notes for everyone who wants to
Okay,
follow
Laurie,
you.
thank
Thank you
you
so
for
much for
having
coming
me.
on today. I appreciate it so much. No problem.